I'm Lorraine Mitchell. I'm 70 years old, and I've learned that you can build a skyscraper that withstands earthquakes, but you can't build a family that withstands greed. I invested over $400,000 into my daughter's education and upbringing, assuming I was raising a woman of character. In return, she handed me a bill for a party and told me my entire existence was an embarrassment. They thought they were dealing with a senile retiree who would sign checks to keep the peace. They didn't know I spent 40 years demolishing unsafe structures, and I still know exactly where to place the dynamite. By tomorrow morning, their social status will be rubble, and I will be the only one holding the blueprints for the future. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The silence in my study wasn't peaceful. It was pressurized. It was the kind of heavy, static air you feel inside a tunnel just before the structural supports give way. I sat in my leather wingback chair, the one Grace had bought me for my retirement, and looked across the mahogany desk at the two people who were currently trying to bulldoze my life. My daughter, Destiny, sat on the edge of the sofa. She was 30 years old, but in that moment, she looked like a stranger modeling expensive clothes she couldn't afford. Beside her was Marcus, her fiancé. He was a man who smiled too much and said too little, wearing a watch that cost more than my first car. Between us, on the polished wood of my desk, lay the binder. It was a monstrosity of white leather and gold lettering. The wedding of Destiny and Marcus. It looked less like a wedding plan and more like a hostile takeover bid. So, Destiny said, tapping a manicured fingernail on the cover, we finalized the venue. Riverside Estate is the only option, Mama. The Wellington family expects a certain caliber of event. You understand. I leaned forward, clasping my hands. My knuckles were swollen from arthritis, but my grip was still strong. Riverside Estate, I repeated. That's the mansion by the river. The one that charges $50 just for a glass of water. It's about the atmosphere, Lorraine. Marcus chimed in. His voice was smooth, practiced. He sounded like a car salesman trying to move a lemon off the lot. My parents, the Wellingtons, they have a reputation. We can't have them walking into a community center. It reflects poorly on all of us. Reflects poorly, I echoed. Marcus, I'm a retired structural engineer. I care about load-bearing walls and tensile strength. I don't care about reflections. Destiny sighed, a sharp, impatient sound that grated on my nerves. She reached over and flipped the binder open to a page marked with a neon sticky note. Look at the numbers, Mama. We've managed to keep the catering budget under $80,000. That's a steal for 5 courses. I looked at the spreadsheet. The numbers were formatted in a clean sans serif font, but they were screaming at me. $80,000 for food. That was 2 years of college tuition. That was the down payment on a solid starter home. $80,000, I said, my voice flat. For one night. Destiny, do you have any idea how many hours of overtime I worked to save $80,000? Stop living in the past, she snapped. This is the modern world. Prices have changed. And besides, it's not just food, it's an experience. We're having a raw bar, a Wagyu station, and a midnight truffle service. Truffles, I said, at midnight, while I'm paying the mortgage on this house. Destiny's expression shifted. It was a subtle tightening of the eyes, a hardening of the jaw. She exchanged a quick, meaningful glance with Marcus. This was it, the ambush. Actually, Mama, she said, her voice dropping to a casual, conversational tone that set off every alarm bell in my head. That's something we need to discuss. The house. I looked around the room. I had built the bookshelves myself. I had laid the hardwood floors with grace. Every scratch, every dent, every coat of paint held a memory. What about my house? Well, Marcus started, leaning forward. After the wedding, Destiny and I are going to need a place that suits our trajectory. The Wellington family has offered to get us into Buckhead, but we need a significant down payment. Cash. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. And, Destiny continued, not looking at me, focusing instead on the gold clasp of her purse. We think it's time you downsized. This place is too big for one old woman. It's outdated. The wiring is old. The style is archaic. We've already spoken to a realtor. If we list it next week, we can get the cash in time for the closing on our new penthouse. The room went dead silent. I stared at my daughter. She wasn't asking. She was informing. She had already spoken to a realtor. She had already spent the money from the sale of my home. In her head. You want me to sell the house? I said slowly. The house your mother and I built. The house where you took your first steps. You want me to sell it so you can buy a penthouse? It's an investment, Mama. Destiny threw her hands up. God, Why do you have to be so sentimental? It's just wood and brick. It's rotting anyway. Mom is gone. You're here all alone. It's pathetic, honestly. You rattling around in this museum. Pathetic, I whispered. Yes, pathetic, she pressed, sensing weakness. Marcus's parents have offered to let you stay in their guest cottage for a few months until you find a condo. A nice, small condo somewhere with assisted living nearby, you know, for when you start forgetting things. I looked at Marcus. He was smirking. It was faint, but it was there. He thought he had won. He thought the old woman was cornered. I see, I said. I closed the binder. The heavy thud echoed like a gavel strike. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. We have, Marcus said, relaxing back into the sofa. We're just thinking about your future, Lorraine. Efficiency, optimization. Isn't that what you always taught us? Optimization, I agreed. Yes, that is a core principle. So, Destiny said, pulling a contract out of the pocket of the binder, we just need you to sign the authorization for the joint account today. The vendors need deposits by Friday, and the realtor needs the listing agreement. She slid the papers across the desk. They sat there, white and crisp, waiting for my signature to sign away my life's work. I need to review the structural integrity of this plan, I said, standing up. Leave the binder. I'll look over the figures tonight. Destiny rolled her eyes. Mama, we don't have time for your little inspections. The dates are filling up. I said I will look at it, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Leave it. Something in my tone made Marcus sit up straighter. He put a hand on Destiny's arm. It's fine, babe. Let her look. She's an engineer. She needs to measure twice. Cut once. Right, Lorraine. Right, I said. Measure twice. Cut once. They stood up to leave. Destiny paused at the door, looking back at the living room. God, we're going to have to gut this place before we show it. That wallpaper is hideous. Then, she walked out. I watched them get into Marcus's leased sports car. I watched them drive away. And then, for the first time in 10 years, I locked the deadbolt on the front door, in the middle of the day. I went back to my desk. I didn't open the binder. Instead, I opened my laptop. I wasn't going to measure the drapes. I was going to inspect the foundation, and if I found rot, I was going to burn the whole thing down. I spent the next 3 hours performing a forensic audit of my own life. I logged into my primary bank accounts. I checked the retirement funds. Everything seemed stable on the surface. But the wedding account or joint account I had foolishly opened with Destiny 6 months ago to handle small expenses was flashing red. I clicked on the transaction history. My breath hitched. A pending transfer. $50,000. The destination was an LLC I didn't recognize. Apex Event Solutions. I grabbed the binder and frantically flipped through the vendor list. Florists, caterers, musicians, venue rental. I scanned every name. Apex Event Solutions was nowhere to be found. What are you doing, Destiny? I muttered to the empty room. My heart hammered against my ribs. $50,000. That was the emergency fund. That was the roof repair money. If that transfer cleared, it was gone. I looked at the times. It had been initiated 2 hours ago. It was still in pending review status. I didn't think. I reacted. I grabbed my car keys and sprinted out the door. The bank was 20 minutes away, but I made it in 12. I parked my sedan crookedly across 2 spaces and ran inside. The air conditioning hit me like a wall of ice, but I was sweating. I bypassed the line of people waiting for tellers and went straight to the glass-walled office of the branch manager, Mr. Patterson. Lorraine Patterson looked up from his computer, startled. Is everything all right? Stop the transfer, I gasped, leaning heavily on his desk. The $50,000 to Apex. You have to freeze it. Patterson frowned, his fingers already flying across his keyboard. Take a seat, Lorraine. Catch your breath. Let me look. I didn't authorize it, I said, my voice shaking with rage. It's a joint account, but that amount, that's theft. It's fraud. Patterson stared at the screen. He clicked the mouse once, twice, then he stopped. He slowly took his hand off the mouse and looked at me with a pity that made my stomach turn. Lorraine, he said softly, the transfer isn't pending. I saw it, I argued, on the screen. It said pending. It cleared 3 minutes ago, Patterson said. It was an automated wire. Once it hits the receiving bank, it's gone. I can't pull it back. 3 minutes. I slammed my hand on the desk. 3 minutes. Call them. Call the other bank. I can flag it for fraud review, Patterson said. But since Destiny is a signatory on the account, legally, she has the right to move those funds, unless you can prove she was coerced. The bank considers this a valid transaction. I sank into the chair. I was too late. I had spent hours looking at spreadsheets while they were looting the vault. I had approached this like a standard inspection, looking for cracks, while they were using industrial drills. Who is Apex? I asked, my voice hollow. Can you see the beneficiary? Patterson clicked again. It's a shell, Lorraine, general corporate account, but the routing number, it goes to a bank in the Caymans. The Caymans, the wedding vendor with a Cayman Islands account. They weren't paying for flowers, I realized. The horror washed over me, cold and absolute. They were moving the money offshore. They were stealing it. I walked out of the bank. The sun was blinding. I stood in the parking lot, surrounded by the mundane bustle of daily life, people buying groceries, depositing checks, living their honest little lives, and I realized I was bringing a slide rule to a knife fight. I had wasted time chasing the money. The money was just the symptom. The disease was the entitlement, and to cure the disease, I didn't need a banker. I needed an exterminator. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. The panic had burned off, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't dialed in 15 years. It was under Do Not Call. The bar was called the Iron Foundry. It was a dive on the industrial side of Atlanta. The kind of place where the floor was sticky and the bartenders didn't ask for your name. It was fitting. I sat in a booth in the back, nursing a black coffee. The door opened, and a man walked in. He was wearing a suit that cost more than the building, but he wore it with an aggressive carelessness. His silver hair was slicked back, and his eyes scanned the room like a predator looking for a limping gazelle. Vernon Drake. He spotted me and grinned. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. Lorraine Mitchell, Vernon boomed, walking over and sliding into the booth opposite me. As I live and breathe, I thought you were dead, or worse, playing bingo. Hello, Vernon, I said. Vernon Drake was a corporate liquidator. In the construction world, we were natural enemies. I built things. He tore them apart and sold the scraps. We had fought over contracts, over zoning, over everything for decades. He was ruthless, unethical, and brilliant. To what do I owe the pleasure? Vernon signaled the waitress for a scotch. You didn't call me to reminisce about the '98 stadium project. I need a demolition expert, I said. Vernon laughed. You, the woman who thinks every brick is sacred. You want to knock something down. What is it, a mall? An old factory? My family, I said. The laughter died in Vernon's throat. He looked at me really, looked at me, analyzing the dark circles under my eyes, the tension in my jaw. He leaned back, crossing his arms. I'm listening. My daughter and her fiancé, I began, keeping my voice low. They aren't just ungrateful. They're embezzling. They've moved $50,000 to an offshore account, disguised as a vendor. They plan to sell my house out from under me. They think I'm a senile mark. Vernon whistled low. Kids these days, no respect for the hustle. They just want the payout. I want to stop them, I said. But I don't just want to stop the wedding. I want to liquidate their leverage. I want to strip their assets, expose their debts, and leave them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. I want a hostile takeover of my own life. Vernon took a sip of the scotch the waitress had placed in front of him. He swirled the amber liquid, watching the light catch it. You want me to audit your daughter? I want you to dig, I said. I can read a blueprint, Vernon, but you can find the bodies buried in the foundation. I need to know where the money is really going. I need to know what debts Marcus is hiding. I need the dirt. And why should I help you? Vernon asked, his eyes gleaming. We hated each other for 40 years. Lorraine, you called me a vulture in the local paper. I did, I admitted, and I was right. You are a vulture. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I slid it across the table. That's a retainer, I said, and the promise that when I sell the house, you get the listing. Exclusive rights. Vernon opened the envelope. He glanced at the check, then back at me. But it wasn't the money that interested him. It was the game. I could see it in his eyes. He missed the hunt. The Mitchell estate, Vernon mused, prime land. I could subdivide that into 4 lots, make a killing. Do the job, I said, and you can turn it into a parking lot for all I care. Vernon extended his hand. His grip was dry and cold. Welcome to the dark side, Lorraine. Let's go hunting. Vernon didn't work from an office. He worked from a war room. His penthouse apartment was filled with monitors, servers, and stacks of legal pads. He moved through data streams like I moved through a construction site, identifying load-bearing points and weak spots. Here's the problem with amateurs, Vernon said 2 days later. pointing at a complex web of transactions on his main screen. They think they're invisible because they use an LLC, but money leaves footprints. I stood behind him, staring at the digital autopsy of Marcus's financial life. What am I looking at? You're looking at a Ponzi scheme of lifestyle, Vernon said. See this Apex Event Solutions. It's not just an offshore account. It's a pass-through entity for an online gambling syndicate. I felt the blood drain from my face. Gambling. Marcus isn't just greedy, Vernon said, typing furiously. He's a desperate addict. He owes sharks. Lorraine, real sharks. Not the corporate kind like me. The kind that break kneecaps. He pulled up another window. Look at this credit card statement. The one for the bachelor party in Vegas. It wasn't a party. It was a debt payment. $10,000 to a consultant in Nevada. That's a bookie. And the suits? I asked. On the tailoring bills. All on credit, Vernon said. He has 7 credit cards maxed out. He's rotating the debt, paying one with the other. The wedding, the money they're squeezing from you, it's not for the wedding. It's a bailout. A bailout, I whispered. Exactly. Vernon spun his chair around to face me. They need your cash to pay off the syndicate before the wedding. If they don't, Marcus gets hurt, and the Wellingtons, they have no idea. Marcus is terrified his parents will find out he's broke. That's why he needs your money to maintain the illusion for them. He's using my life savings to cover his gambling debts so he can marry my daughter and keep lying to his parents. And Destiny knows, Vernon added softly. That was the blow that almost knocked me down. How do you know? Because Vernon pointed to a text log he had extracted. She signed the transfer authorization for the $50,000. And look at this email thread. She's negotiating with the bookie for an extension. She says, and I quote, "My mother is a liquid asset. Just wait until the wedding. My mother is a liquid asset." I stared at the words on the screen. They blurred. I felt a profound, seismic shift inside me. The last remnants of the mother I used to be, the one who remembered teaching her to ride a bike, the one who cried at her graduation, crumbled into dust. In her place stood the architect, cold, precise, unforgiving. "Okay," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like grinding stone. "I have the data. The structure is compromised beyond repair. It's time for a controlled demolition." Vernon grinned. It was a terrifying sight. "What's the plan, boss?" "We conduct a stress test," I said. "I'm going to invite them to dinner. I'm going to give them one last chance to be human beings. And when they fail, we pull the plug." The smell of pot roast filled the kitchen. It was Grace's recipe. Hearty, simple, honest. It smelled like safety. It smelled like the home I was about to destroy. I set the table with the good china. I placed 3 wine glasses. I lit the candles. It was a perfect stage for a tragedy. Daphne and Marcus arrived at 7 sharp. They brought a bottle of wine that looked expensive but was actually a cheap blend with a fancy Lobola. Perfect metaphor for their lives. "Mama," Destiny said, breezy, fake kissing my cheek. "Something smells rustic." "It's your mother's pot roast," I said. We sat down. The conversation was strained. Marcus talked about the pressures of high society, how hard it was to manage expectations. Destiny picked at the meat like it was poisoned. "So," Destiny said, pushing her bowl away, "did you sign the papers? The realtor is hounding me." I wiped my mouth with a napkin. "I've been thinking about the budget," I said. Marcus leaned in, his eyes hungry. "And I've realized that you're right. I lied." They both smiled. It was predatory. "However," I continued, reaching under the table and pulling out a small envelope, "I also believe in limits, structural limits." I placed a check on the table. It was for $75,000. "This," I said, "is everything I can liquidate without selling the house. It's a lot of money. It covers the catering and the dress. But the house stays. I'm not selling Grace's home." The silence that followed was instant and absolute. The smiles vanished. Destiny picked up the check. She looked at the number. Then she looked at me with a gaze so full of contempt it physically hurt. She spat. "Are you joking? It's a generous gift," I said calmly. "It's nothing." She threw the check back onto the table. "Do you have any idea what we're up against? We need the house money, Mama. The penthouse requires a cash deposit of $300,000. "That sounds like a luxury problem," I said, "not a survival problem." "You selfish old woman," Marcus hissed. The mask was gone. The polite son-in-law had vanished, replaced by the desperate addict. "You're sitting on a gold mine in this rotting heap of a house, and you won't help your own family." "This house isn't a heap," I said. "I built the extension with my own hands. It's garbage." Destiny screamed. She stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. Your life is garbage, Mama. Look at you. You sit here eating peasant food, worshipping a dead woman, hoarding piles of brick and mortar, while I'm trying to build a real future. You are worthless. Your career was worthless. Nobody cares about the bridges you built. They only care about money. And you are holding it hostage. She was panting. Her face was red. Worthless, I repeated. Yes, worthless. She slammed her hand on the table. If you don't sell this house, don't bother coming to the wedding. In fact, if you don't sell it, you're dead to me. I won't have a failure of a mother dragging down my brand. I looked at Marcus. Do you agree with her? Marcus didn't hesitate. She's right. Lorraine, you're being unreasonable. Just sign over the deed. Don't be a stubborn fossil. I looked at the check on the table. The paper represented years of labor, years of sacrifice. I reached out, picked up the check, and slowly, deliberately, tore it in half. Rip. I put the halves together and tore them again. Rip. Destiny's eyes widened. What are you doing? I'm accepting your assessment, I said, my voice quiet but harder than steel. You said my life is worthless. You said my assets are garbage. So I'm removing the garbage from your life. You're bluffing, Destiny sneered. You'll cave. You always cave. Get out, I said. What? Get out. I didn't shout, I projected. It was the voice I used to clear a construction site before a blast. Leave my house, take your wine, and don't ever come back. Destiny grabbed her purse. Fine, rot in here, but don't expect an invite. And when you die alone, I'm going to sell this place for scrap. She stormed out. Marcus followed, shooting me a look of pure venom. The front door slammed. I sat in the silence. The pot roast was cold. I picked up my phone and dialed Vernon. It's confirmed, I said. The structure is condemned. Initiate the demolition protocol. Music to my ears, Vernon replied. I'll have the paperwork ready by morning. The next 3 days were a blur of lethal efficiency. Grief is a luxury for people who have time. I didn't have time. I had a deadline. First, the money. Vernon and I met with my attorney, a young shark named Deshawn, who Vernon recommended. We set up an irrevocable trust, the Grace Mitchell Scholarship for Structural Engineering. Once you sign this, Deshawn warned, tapping the document, the assets are no longer yours. You can't take them back. And more importantly, no one can sue you for them. They belong to the trust. Sign it, I said. I transferred everything, my savings, my stocks, my retirement, millions of dollars moved in a keystroke. I left myself just enough to live and a modest pension. The rest was locked in a fortress. No lawyer could breach. Second, the house, I didn't list it. I didn't call a realtor. I called the Greenway Concern. They had been trying to buy the land next to the river for years to build a public park. I'll sell it to you, I told the stunned director, on one condition. The house gets demolished, but the garden, my wife's garden, stays, and it becomes a public park named after her. Mrs. Mitchell, we would be honored, she said, but the price market value minus 20% for a quick close, I said, and I want the deed transferred in 48 hours. They scrambled. They made it happen. By Friday afternoon, the house didn't belong to me. It belonged to the city. I was just a tenant with 30 days to vacate. Third, the wedding. This was where I took the most pleasure. I sat in Vernon's war room with a list of vendors. I was the signatory on the contracts. I was the financier. I called the florist first. This is Lorraine Mitchell. Cancelled the order. But ma'am, the wedding is in 2 days. The flowers are already cut. I am withdrawing funding. If you deliver them, you will not be paid. Sue me if you want, but my assets are in a trust you can't touch. Click. I called the caterer, the musicians, the limo service. Then came the big one, Riverside Estate, Mrs. Mitchell. The manager said, his voice dripping with condescension. The deposit is non-refundable. Keep the deposit, I said. But I am canceling the event. I am formally revoking the rental agreement. If you open those gates on Sunday, you are trespassing on my contract. You can't do this. The Wellington family isn't paying you. I cut him off. I am, and I say the party is over. Click. I looked at Vernon. He was grinning like a maniac. You're a natural, Lorraine. Remind me never to cross you. One last call, I said. I dialed the number for Apex Event Solutions, the gambling front. A gruff voice answered. Yeah, this is Lorraine Mitchell, I said. I'm calling regarding the $50,000 transfer from account ending in 4590. The line went quiet. We don't do refunds, pal. I don't want a refund. I said. I'm calling to inform you that Marcus has been using my stolen identity to make payments. I filed a federal fraud report with the FBI this morning. They're tracing the wire. You did what? The voice lost its cool. If I were you, I said, I'd cut ties with Marcus before the feds knock on your door. He's a liability. I hung up. You didn't actually call the FBI, Vernon said. No, I smiled. But a bookie doesn't wait to check. They just cut the loose end. Marcus wasn't going to have a wedding. He was going to have a very, very bad weekend. The Sunday of the wedding was a beautiful day. Clear skies, mild breeze, the kind of day Grace would have loved. I wasn't at the church. I wasn't at the hotel. I was sitting in a booth at the Iron Foundry, eating a burger with Vernon. My phone was on the table. Face up. It started at 9 a.m. Buzz. A text from Destiny. Mama, why is the limo not here? I took a bite of my burger. Buzz. Mama, pick up. The florists just called. They said you canceled. Is this a sick joke? Buzz, buzz, buzz. Marcus. Lorraine, fix this now. My parents are asking questions. I sipped my coffee. At 10:30 a.m., the phone started ringing continuously. I watched the names flash across the screen. Destiny, Marcus, Mrs. Wellington, unknown number. You're not going to answer, Vernon asked, watching the screen light up like a strobe light. No, I said. I've already delivered my statement. I imagined the scene, the bridesmaids standing in the hotel lobby with no ride, the realization setting in, the frantic calls to vendors who weren't coming. But the real show was at the venue. At 1 p.m. My phone vibrated with a voicemail. It was Monique, the wedding planner. She was screaming, Mrs. Mitchell, the gates are locked. There are chains on the gates. The Wellingtons are here. The press is here. They think the venue went bankrupt. You have to come down here. The press? I asked Vernon. I might have tipped off a few society bloggers. Vernon winked. Told them there was going to be a surprise twist at the Wellington wedding. I could see it perfectly. The gleaming black SUVs pulling up to the river, the locked gates of Riverside Estate, the sign I had Vernon commission and hang on the chain link fence early this morning. It didn't say canceled. It said venue closed due to non-payment by client. Public humiliation, the one thing the Wellington family feared more than death. Marcus's parents would be standing there in their tuxedos and gowns, being photographed in front of a sign that basically called them deadbeats. And Marcus Mortis would be trying to explain why the $50,000 he paid didn't secure the venue. He would be realizing that the bookies were looking for him, his in-laws hated him, and his fiancée was a bride with no aisle to walk down. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Destiny. I hate you. You ruined my life. We are coming to the house. Showtime, I said, wiping my mouth. Let's go home, Vernon. I have one last box to pack. The house was empty. The movers had come yesterday. The furniture was gone. The paintings were down. The only thing left was a single cardboard box on the kitchen counter, and the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors. I stood by the window, watching the driveway. Vernon stood in the corner, leaning against the wall, a silent witness. They arrived in a cavalcade of fury. Marcus's sports car screeched into the driveway, followed by a massive luxury SUV carrying the Wellingtons. Destiny jumped out first. She was wearing her wedding dress. It was stained with mud at the hem, probably from stomping around outside the locked gates. Her makeup was smeared. She looked deranged. She burst through the front door, not bothering to knock. Where are you? She shrieked. Where is she? She ran into the kitchen and stopped. She saw the empty room. She saw the bare walls. She froze. Marcus ran in behind her, looking pale and sweaty. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Wellington, followed, their faces masks of cold aristocratic rage. What is this? Destiny whispered, spinning around. Where is the furniture? Where is everything? I moved out, I said calmly. You, she hissed, marching toward me. You canceled everything. You humiliated us. Do you know what happened today? Do you know who saw that sign? I imagine everyone saw it, I said. You petty, vindictive old woman. Mrs. Wellington stepped forward. We will sue you for damages, emotional distress, breach of contract. You can't sue me, I said. I paid for the contracts. I have the right to cancel them. We need the money, Marcus shouted, cracking. Lorraine, you don't understand. We need the cash from the house sale now, or we're dead. Mrs. Wellington asked, her voice like ice. What are you talking about? Because of the gambling debts, I said. The Wellingtons turned to look at Marcus. Gambling debts, Mrs. Wellington asked. Marcus shrank back. She's lying. She's crazy. I'm not lying, I said, and I'm not selling the house to give you a dime. You have to, Destiny screamed. It's my inheritance. It's my house, too. Actually, I said. I picked up the brochure from the counter. It was the glossy pamphlet from the Greenway I held it out. I sold the land to the city yesterday, I explained. The house is scheduled for demolition next week. They're going to plant a rose garden here, the Grace Mitchell Memorial Garden. Destiny stared at the brochure. Her hands were shaking. You sold it, for a park, and the money? Marcus asked, his eyes desperate. Where is the money from the sale? That, I said, pointing to the other document on the counter, is in the trust. I handed Destiny the charter for the scholarship fund. The Grace Mitchell Scholarship, I read aloud. Fully funded, it will pay for 20 students to become civil engineers. The endowment is exactly the amount of your wedding budget, plus the sale of the house. Destiny looked at the paper. She looked at the number. You gave it away, she whispered. You gave my money away. 2 strangers. It was never your money, Destiny, I said softly. It was my life's work. You called it garbage. You said my career was worthless, so I invested it in people who will value it. Future builders, future engineers, people who know that you have to build a foundation before you can build a penthouse. I have nothing, she sobbed. I have no wedding. I have no house. I have nothing. You have Marcus, I said. I looked at Marcus. He was backing away toward the door, his phone buzzing in his pocket. Likely the bookies. The Wellingtons were looking at him with pure disgust. They knew. The illusion was shattered. I think you should go, I said. The new owners are coming to change the locks in an hour. I hate you, Destiny screamed, tearing the brochure in half. I will never forgive you. I know, I said, but for the first time in years, I don't care. I picked up the final box, Grace's favorite books. I walked past them. I walked past the weeping bride, the terrified groom, and the arrogant in-law. I walked out the front door and down the steps. Vernon was waiting by my car. He opened the door for me. That, Vernon said, was a masterpiece. Brutal, efficient, total collapse. It wasn't a collapse, I said, looking back at the empty house one last time. It was a controlled demolition. Now, the site is clear. What now? Vernon asked as we got in. Now, I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached my eyes. Now I'm going to go build something new. I started the engine. I drove away, leaving them in the ruins of their own greed, while the sun set over the garden that would soon belong to everyone. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say, you were here.